So it seems like some developers are making the Xbox their Xbox when it comes to developing games. Why hasn't the intro started yet? It's Sunday, so let's get sensational. I'm Mike, and I'm available on all platforms where YouTube resides. And one of those platforms just happens to be the Xbox, but while I may make appearances on the Xbox, there have been some games that have been like, nah, we good. And now Microsoft, well, they're asking why. So Microsoft released a developers blog last week talking about their focus on reaching out to developers, basically to make the experience of making Xbox games better. Now, the Kotaku article covering this points out a recent incident where the game The Last Song didn't come out on Xbox, and when the developer was asked why, they were like, Microsoft just stopped communicating with us. So I'm sure that part of them trying to make the experience better is because of this whole incident. Now, Phil Spencer did reach out to the developer, and that game is coming to Xbox at some point, but if communication is causing third-party games to skip the Xbox, they need to get that under control. But aside from wanting feedback on developers currently making games for Xbox, they also want to hear from people who have decided not to put games on the Xbox, and they mentioned that if they're using a competitor's product, they would like to be able to learn from them. So it's not really a secret that since the Xbox One, they've been in a rough spot when it comes to their first-party output, but if they start losing third parties as well, it ain't gonna be good for them. The Kotaku article also mentions some of the reasons why devs may be skipping the Xbox, including the Xbox player base being incentivized not to buy games and subscribe to Game Pass instead, the lower overall sales of the system, and also them having the Xbox Series S, and they have to develop games for that, which is at a lower power target than the Xbox Series X and the PS5, so it's gonna be more work to make sure that it runs on that console. But overall, in my opinion, it really just comes down to the Xbox install base, and if developers think it's worth the extra work to put their game on the Xbox. It's only going to make sense if there's enough of an install base where they're going to get a good return sales-wise. It seems like the majority of games still come to every platform possible, so it's not like this is a huge problem right now, but it could be for them in the future, so it's good that they're at least looking into it. But while Microsoft is looking into why people are not developing games for the Xbox, Sony may be looking into why people are skipping pre-orders for the PS5 Pro. So it seems like, at least over the last few years, every time new gaming hardware releases, it pretty much sells out instantly. I mean, people heavily criticized the PlayStation Portal, and it was still sold out for months after it released. So while the PS5 Pro kinda seems like an unnecessary upgrade, I think people were still expecting it to sell out once the pre-orders went live on Sony Direct. I even checked in on that day to see how crazy it was, and there was like an hour queue to get the checkout. The pre-orders through other retailers are going live on October 10th, but it seems like the demand may not be there considering that pre-orders are still available through PlayStation Direct. And it seems like the expectations based on the stories about it was that it was going to sell out. And that's basically because Sony doesn't typically make a lot more than they expect to sell. But nope, the PS5 Pro actually seems like it'll be easy to get for people that actually want one. Now, obviously, this isn't an indicator of how well it's going to sell because no one knows how many pre-orders they've taken up until this point, and also it hasn't launched yet. And it's launching during holiday season, which is obviously big for video game sales. But one thing that I predicted in my reaction video was that it just wouldn't sell well in general because the pitch was hard to justify in the first place, unless you're into frame rates and graphical details at almost a microscopic level. The differences to the average person are probably negligible. I really don't think that it has anything to do with the price, it's just a hard sell overall. And the reason I say that is because there is a PS5 Pro bundle that costs $1,000 that actually did sell out, and that's the special edition Grade Anniversary console. So this makes sense as to why it sold out. It was a special edition, and they probably just didn't make as many, so even at $1,000, the collectors will still buy it. In fact, the scalpers have already hit eBay and are basically trying to sell them for huge markets before they're even out. Well, Sony Japan at least thought of this and tried to combat scalpers by making it a requirement that you have a PS4 or a PS5 account with 30 hours of runtime accumulated between February 2014 and September 19, 2024. Having a cutoff date for it was actually smart, so that way people can't just run up the playtime in like a day or two and then try to order one. I'm not sure why they didn't do that for US customers as well. Maybe they thought there would be a lot of negativity and they might get backlash towards it if they did it here, but I think it would have been a better solution than whatever shenanigans took place with the US pre-orders. But while it is easy to find a regular PS5 Pro, it's getting hard to find a Nintendo Switch. Emulator, that is. And that's what we're talking about today. And our final story. So I have a secret to tell you about Nintendo that's going to be really shocking. I'm not sure you're aware of this, but they kind of hate emulators in the emulation community. So they kind of have a history of going after ROM sites and emulator authors, and they basically forced the most popular Switch emulator, Yuzu, to shut down earlier this year. So it's not a surprise that they went after the other most popular Switch emulator, Ryujinx. Now, I will say that I completely understand from Nintendo's standpoint of going after emulators and ROM sites for their current console. Personally, I do use Switch emulators. I rip my own games because I prefer to play them on PC, where in some cases you can have mods that make them run better. But realistically, I know that a lot of people use them for piracy. So like I said, I understand both sides. But with that being said, emulators aren't illegal as long as they don't contain any source code from the original system, so I'm all for emulation. But back to the Yuzu situation really quick. So when Nintendo threatened to sue Yuzu's creators and got them to shut down their emulator earlier this year, there was some speculation that not everything was on the up and up when it came to them behind the scenes, and that in some cases they may have promoted piracy, so it made sense for them to shut down. With Ryujinx, it seems like it was a little bit different. So the creators of Ryujinx, GDK-chan, basically said they were contacted by Nintendo and they were made an offer to shut everything down, and they accepted it. So yeah, that's basically it. There's no details on what Nintendo offered them, whether it was money or if it was a threat of legal action, but whatever the case is, they were like, we're out. I feel like if it was a potential lawsuit, it would have got out like the Yuzu situation earlier this year. So it was probably harder for Nintendo to find a reason to sue them, at least for now. So they maybe offered them some money and they just decided, I'm going to take it and shut down. And also when they shut down Yuzu, they apologized for potentially contributing to piracy, whereas the message from GDK-chan was thankful for everyone who contributed to the project and their work, and didn't mention anything negative about emulation or anything like that. So this doesn't sound like the Yuzu situation where Nintendo basically threatened them and forced them to apologize. So I really hope that this was a positive situation for the creators of Ryujinx and that at least they're well compensated by Nintendo. Unfortunately, Nintendo hasn't treated a lot of YouTube creators that well, as they've continued to issue copyright strikes to people even showing Nintendo games running in emulators. So this story specifically mentions the channel Retro Game Corp because they've received 2 copyright strikes already from Nintendo because of this whole thing, but it's affecting a lot of other channels as well. Now, if you're not familiar with YouTube's strike system, basically if you get 3 strikes, your channel is terminated, and it really doesn't make much sense to even do a copyright strike in most cases because Nintendo could do a copyright claim instead, and they could have just taken some or all of the revenue from the video and it wouldn't really hurt the channel. I mean, I even have copyright claims right now on some of my old videos, like I did a Star Wars Squadron VR video a while ago, but because of the music on it, it got copyright claimed and I never made any money off of it, but ultimately I was fine with it and I left the video up as is. So Nintendo is obviously doing these strikes because they hate people and they want to defeat piracy by crushing people's livelihood into the dust. I mean, either way, it's almost impossible to defeat piracy. But let me know what you think in the comments. How do you feel about emulation? And what do you think about emulated games being shown on YouTube? Do you think that's a step too far? Again, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button thing so you know if I drop a video or a live stream. I know I do at least 2 things at the same time.